welcome to Geek Out 55. We are going to be doing a live book discussion of Bushido Online. Or, sorry, I just was looking at it. Or, yeah, Bushido Online, The Battle Begins. Couldn't remember the second part of the title.
Well, when we look at it in our library, it's just Bushido Online, is
Yeah.
what we see. You don't even see the subtitle. Um, yeah, yeah. Final Geek Out, at least scheduled Geek Out of 2020. We were having fun chatting back and forth as the same one there, um,
Oh, yeah.
under the same account. If you're following along in the chat later on, yes, tutorial completed now. Real 2020 can begin here shortly. And yeah, happy holidays to you all. Happy holidays, Peter. Really enjoy the people that make time to hang out with us during the live events and geek out with us. Made a lot of friends in the space this last year. Really been enjoying it. Thankful for you all. Yeah, don't want to spend too much time on all that stuff, but wanted to get that out there. Thank you. Um, yeah, Bushido Online. I want to say I've gone through it maybe 3 times. How many times did you listen to this, Pete? Because this was a brand new book for us, right?
I think I managed 5 this week.
Okay. Um, we were talking a bit before, and it's definitely grown on me. Um, it ties back into the conversation we had about like lit RPG, that there's not one size fits all for it, just like there's not one size fits all for fantasy or sci-fi or other subgenres. Um, but yeah, it's a fun story. It has some of challenges, um, but yeah, what are your thoughts?
So honestly, like my first pass or my first time reading it, I was a little disappointed. Um, Mainly because I do have quite a few MMOs under my belt, as well as I'm quite versed in the lit RPG realms. But after like the second, third time, I kind of adjusted my perspective. And this book, the intro really says it all, where essentially there's a young what is it, mixed martial arts
Hmm.
fighter who gets injured and more or less loses his sight. This book very much is a beginner friendly entry level introduction to the video game scene, as well as it sounds like someone announcing a fight.
Yeah.
So I was a little disappointed on some of the like stat mechanics, but this is book one. It was just setting a foundation, and there's a lot of exciting material that was hinted at, like being able to modify your abilities was pretty exciting. And I can't say that I've seen other lit RPGs or MMOs utilize that. The closest thing I can think of is the Completionist Chronicles, where you can combine spells to make a new spell, but that's still different, where like you don't know what you're gonna get. Where my understanding so far, for what we know from the first book, you can, it's kind of like a slot, like a weapon slot, where you can put it in and take it out and modify it and change it, and you're not stuck with it. Where Completionist Chronicles, once you smash them together, you have to relearn the original abilities.
You said it very well. One of the challenges that I had that could be easily argued a strength for this book is it's very newbie friendly. And there were a lot of times that I wish it went a little bit deeper in some elements. Um, I also, we talked about it, I believe, a bit before we hopped on, wanted to see a bit more of just kind of like the real life side of things because, like you said, here's this athlete at his peak, used to like pushing his body to the limit, and he loses it all, spirals into depression, and then he gets introduced to this game as a complete newbie. Like he's never really been interested in video games before, so it's very it it focused on the immersion part of it. I felt a little bit more.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and I like they keep commenting that he's really good at not dying, and it's a difference from, relying on your moves and being able to move as a fighter, and we get to see him kind of struggle with that with oh, I guess the first big struggle is when he's going up and doing the old Loon Lady quest, and he, finds random group of people, and it's a group quest, and he's fighting these, evil cloths, and it talks
bed
about
sheet.
like the feel of he's used to like a solid impact or to feel, his punches connecting, but fighting a cloth that absorbs with it and then tries to wrap around your face, there's just a weird feel. And that's one of the like biggest cons for me is it it can't decide whether you can feel it or you can't feel it, because as far as like pain's concerned, you can't feel it. But then when he's getting recruited by the guilds and the guy puts on the armor and the armor feels weird, like how can you have tactile, sensations without being able to feel pain? And then same thing like when his main ability triggers when he gets below 4% health and he's like, you know, losing his vision and, having trouble focusing, like, yeah, I guess you can kind of do like a wonky visual beer goggle type thing that could insinuate it. Maybe you're like playing Mario Kart and you get inked and you're like, "Ha, I've been driving with my peripherals this whole time. I don't need the center." But at the same time, yeah, the just like I felt like it used a lot of those like physical elements inside the game, like getting hit by the arrows and the impact, but then it also brushed it off where a guy's in the middle of the street and does his mounted combat move and he doesn't even realize that he's like bleeding out all over the floor. So that
so
was a little
there,
bit of a disconnect for me.
he didn't. Sorry, the author didn't do a great job um, elaborating on that, going into the science or how those elements of the game work. I agree with you, and I think there was a couple different angles on it. Um, First off, like you said, they really didn't go in depth, and they talked about how you couldn't feel stuff, not really like pain, but then at sometimes they said that there was some sort of immersion, but not
Yeah,
to the same
sensation.
degree. And I also wonder how much of it is just like the casual, like, oh, the feeling is ominous, like you don't really feel it, but
Or like
just
your subconscious filling it in.
yeah. And I think part of one of the interesting things once we get into this realm, I don't know how much actual like current VR you've used. I've played a little bit on a friend's Oculus and it's come a long way, but it's not like full immersion, right? Like I think if you start playing
They've
these
come out with
games the
some pretty
way
cool
he
stuff.
is, like this, the main character is binging this game how long? This is pretty much all he does now, right? So we've talked about where we've tried to, people have thought like, oh, I should just blink through this wall, or oh, I should just muscle
Yeah.
memory this ability in game and see what happens. Like imagine being playing like every waking hour. This is his new reality. So the power of the mind actually feeling stuff, right? Um, yeah.
Yeah, as well as like I enjoy lit RPGs and the way each of them do it differently, because for the very classic, everybody knows Sword Art Online. The beginning of it is a brand new MMO launch. Everybody's, pre-ordered, downloaded, ready for launch night. They get
Mm-hmm.
into the game and then they get trapped in the game. And that's very
Mm-hmm.
tropey, and that's kind of the signature move. But for this, it's different where he has a medical incident, medical injury where he can't visually see things, and he's going through his depression. So there's a company that reaches out and they're like, "Hey, we're top in the VR market." And he then goes into the game. But we get little snippets where we don't know if he is logging out. At the very beginning, when he's first getting into the game, they're saying, okay, this is how you do it. After level 5, you can't do it anywhere. You got to be in a special spot to log out, this, that, the other. But we never really, like, we don't know
The
more
last
because he
we
kind
see the
of,
real world, like when they
yeah,
talk about, oh, yeah, you can log out. You remember how, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me play, and then that's the last we see of the real world, at least in book
which
one.
in some regards, like, I can understand if you don't have vision, but you have vision there, like you would binge it like none other. But Ascend Online, another lit RPG, does very well integrating the real world aspect where, for their hand waving, they use nanobots, which,
Mm-hmm.
essentially fixes the whole like, not eating and dying bit. But they need to keep your brain at a baseline, so you have to log out for a 24-hour cycle every 10 days or so. Plus, it adds a revenue generating theme with it. Where for this one, he's kind of covered in that regards because of his occupation, and he ended up getting a
Getting a
lot
nice
of,
payout.
yeah, payout. So the financial bit isn't a concern. The mental bit, we get to see more of his mental anguish. How when
Real, real quick on the technology piece before you go too much further there. Something I'm noticing, you referenced Ascend Online, and I think of a couple other lit RPGs we've read. They fall in different spots on like the fantasy sci-fi spectrum, and then when it
okay,
goes to the sci-fi, there's some that do still that hand waving kind of like this one does, where they basically show up, say 5 minutes of your time, let me log you in, say there's no hardware, okay, so and so, log him in, and then bam, cherry blossoms, like he's there. Uh, no other explanation outside of that, right? Am I remembering this right? For the
yeah.
technology for Bushido?
They briefly mentioned that we only have your visuals connected, so
Okay.
they infer that you'll get smell and touch, and that's where he like feels the impact from punching stuff, but he doesn't feel pain. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of questions, a bit of hand waving, but like Ascend Online, I think one of the benefits it has is it sets it in the future, right? I'm forgetting where exactly, but technology has made some leaps and bounds, so there's like a little bit of that. But yeah, it's interesting seeing the different levels of immersion too, based off of where they say they are in the timeline with science and whatnot. Um, yeah,
But where this book excels and why I think it's very like new to the genre friendly is the storyline very much feels as if you know nothing about the game, someone told you to pick it up and you're just doing your first playthrough. And I am the king of Ooh Shiny, and I will go and do a million different things, and like,
every quest.
yeah, and every quest, and kind of zone into one spot.
I wish I
So
had that meme where it's like doing side story quest progression versus like main quest line. You show up like all geared out, ready for the final boss because yeah, maxed out
I think
everything,
the
every
most recent
storyline.
meme I've seen of that is the dude in his like Ferrari, and he's like sitting on the roof and he's like fishing. And
Yeah.
it's like when you beat the main storyline, you're going back for
Mm,
the side quests.
right, right.
But so this very much feels like that, as well as it feels like it's gearing more towards the PvP aspect, which is kind of a bold move, which from the beginning he's a mixed martial artist, and this is essentially a feudal Japan society with a little bit of magic. So it fits a theme, and that's where it's like exciting but not exciting because it references the levels. So you have an idea, but we never get to see like raw stats, which I guess is more new person friendly, but kind of
Hmm.
irks me. And then yeah, it seems like it's gearing more war PvP.
It's a lower learning curve for like people who are coming to the genre or kind of trying something like this. Um, Same with Sword Art Online. Part of the immersion argument was they stuck with swords because they wanted you to have that like physical element, right? There's none of this complicated magic system, none of the
Yeah.
different races to figure out. Like there's ninja, there's samurai, there's like different variations and some feudal Japan dynamics. And then, yeah, low learning
Yeah.
curve.
Well, that
Uh,
plus like I don't know, it's kind of unique the way it sprinkles in the new classes or the other classes. Like it's all about him until that random guy pops up and is like, "Oh, you need to kill me. Just wait." Or, "Okay, we can't do that. There's a level difference. Oh, hey,
hmm
take this." Stay
hmm
in character. And that's one of the things that like I felt it did really well at is it's hard to find a good role-playing group, and they portrayed it very well where oh, I can't remember her name, but the ninja where he's dropping off the package and she's essentially a waitress,
Consummate
but
fighting
she's
afterwards.
or what's that?
And then cons him into helping her defend the territory afterwards. Like that whole scene, like there was beautifully done.
Yeah, it
And we,
was well done.
yeah, and you get also some glimpses of the like the immersion, the role playing side of things from her, as well as seeing the layer behind it of like just enjoying being in this other realm, playing this role, having fun. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and it just yeah, and then the oh weird dynamics between like below level 4, you can't be PvP, which that's one thing that
hmm
kind of irked me is or well, is uniquely different. Normally or typically, I think Horde or Alliance, where like Horde can't kill Horde unless you are in a battlegrounds or you want to do a duel. But for this, there's not really like a this faction, that faction, as far as we know so far.
you're right. It's
But
just the
it's
clans,
all open PvP.
which I'm a sucker for PvP. I'm sure we've gotten into
I
that on this
enjoy it,
channel.
but I don't know. There was just something lacking about the combat. I like. Don't get me wrong. It fit for what it was, but I feel like there was something missing from the combat.
Yes, yes, and it's one of those things that I've noticed. Depending on who I'm reading, they either do combat well or they don't, and it's a matter of how detailed you want to get into it. But I'm with
Or I
you for a
guess for
book that
me,
focuses on PvP. I really didn't get too excited about listening to the combat part of it as I did other elements of the book.
it kind of felt like it was from the perspective of the main fighter. which makes
Okay.
sense to a degree. But I guess when I think like Ascend Online, they take several different viewpoints, and yeah, I guess it's more large scale at that point where they have multiple people fighting multiple people, and then you shift perspectives, and it's you kind of get an overall flow feel. Where for this one, it was like at most, 2 to 4 people.
Yeah, I agree. And it ties back into the book growing on me as I came to accept what type of book it was. And I really think the expectations you set for yourself going into a book can either make or break it for you.
Yeah.
We've been having a lot of fun and listening to a lot of different lit RPG. I know we did the Dakota Kraut binge, where that on the spectrum of like the Completionist Chronicles, as far as like gamer stuff goes, there's a lot of more video game layers and details included in those type of books, right? And the scope of
Well, yeah,
everything,
like,
you're including the guilds. And this one, like everything we said, it's a great entry level story to somebody new to the genre, new to MMOs. Like that's our main character, and we really focus on his perspective. And the combat is like there's other whole other fights going, and we just get like little snapshots, or like, oh yeah, I looted him after the fact, um, as opposed to getting the play by play party dynamic fight that I enjoy so much in some of those other books. Ascend Online does really good with it. Um, yeah.
yeah, but where this book excels is there's only one MMO that I've played where you get that dedicated storyline that you just get engrossed with. And that's what this book did well, because like he's used to having a master for his mixed martial artist, and it talks about the similarities for the, you got to earn my respect, and they don't really give compliments and tried and true tactic, and like we really feel for this NPC. And then just like by the end of it, when all goes south and he's upset because, you know, he thought that he did everything right, and he's also going through a hard time IRL or just in his life in general.
Hmm.
And that would be KOTOR or Star Wars The Old Republic. Like, they did an amazing job on their storyline, and they had great cinematics, and like you felt
Voice
invested in the
acting
character.
for the first time. I think it was like the first MMO that like every cutscene had like voice actors
Yeah.
playing out the. Yeah, yeah.
And so that's where like it did well for like a first playthrough, and you know, yeah,
I felt
it
the nostalgic. Like we keep talking about it being a good entry level book for someone new to the genre, new to MMOs, and that's where it took me back. Like definitely the second listen through. Um, those early first playthroughs of an MMO when you haven't min-maxed everything out. You're just kind of like discovering it, learning the party dynamics and what it means to kite and tank. Uh, and
well, yeah, that's why it was also kind of funky and unique. He was already a natural because of his mixed martial arts,
mhm,
and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, you're great at tanking," and he's like, "Mm-hmm, yeah, sure. What's that?"
fake it till I make it. If I start asking questions, we'll be here all day. Like, sure, yeah.
And at the same time, like it very much feels like the Japanese archetype, where he's a very honorable person, and our first little snippet of that, he's like, I don't know if I can beat up an old lady. And then it's like, oh no, just kidding, it's more of a vengeful spirit type thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
when that assassin tricks him into defending the territory, and she plays the whole like cutesy damsel in distress, and he's
Hmm.
like, "Oh yeah, of course." And then like a second later, he's like, "Wow, did I really just sign up for this?"
Yeah, because he voiced his consent to the fight, and all of a sudden, 2v1. Um, it's a good foundational book. You said it earlier in the stream. There, it hints at a lot of other fun potential aspects that I hope they bring in book 2 and 3, like the large scale warfare. Total War fan, enjoy those large scale mechanics. It'll be really interesting to see if we get that wider lens on the combat and not just the main character when we get to like full battles. Um, they had
So
something to do with like the beta testers and the skills there. I thought that was kind of some interesting foreshadow.
yeah, things that I'm excited in this series. So they briefly touched on the PvE aspect at the very beginning. We get to see him doing some of that. And then throughout the main storyline, like we got the big oh, these are the dark evil people and shadows and demonic powers, and so that hints at like a whole nother race or a whole other faction that we're gonna go up and battle with, which is kind of cool. And then the PvP aspect came back at the very end when they do their first dungeon, and that was exciting. um on one hand, it wasn't the same fight as was in the beta. So though everybody knows, not everybody knows. And they did a good job with like him becoming a Roni, where everybody knew, but nobody wanted to say. But then
I
it was,
appreciated that, and I wonder how much more is underlining there, right? Like the because I think he broke it down so well. It's like loyalty to like your teacher or loyalty to like the greater establishment, right? Like, um, where's your
yeah,
loyalty
the
lie? Are you going to betray your teacher, your sensei, or not? And gosh, I really enjoyed. I'm already bad with names, and then you go and you keep it to the naming conventions this game does. It's really hard to track them.
I struggled because they are Japanese names.
Hmm. Uh,
Though that's where this book did well, because it's always like, oh, blah blah blah, and then it's like, oh yeah, that Kitsune from the Loon Lady quest, and I'm like, oh okay, she's close to our level. She was off doing her own thing. She's back. She skipped this quest. Okay, like that totally makes sense. Like that's where the
it's another
immersion of a first playthrough, and like, yeah, they did well with that. And
shout
then
out again to audiobooks because that's another thing I love about it. When you have solid narrators, this one does a good job. Names don't so much matter because, like, oh, I recognize that voice. Like that's so and so.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I took you off your beat there. What
it's all
else are
good.
you looking
I was
forward
just
to
thinking
in
through other
future
points.
books? I think
So
we'll see more of the politics with the dynasty or whatnot.
one
Um,
thing that I was excited about and disappointed about is like he is, a mixed martial artist, and we get to see him kind of be like, "Oh, hey, I wish I picked up oh, keto or whatever." No, not keto. Keto?
Kendo, basically using a
Kendo.
sword.
Yeah,
Yeah,
essentially for utilizing a weapon, and that's kind of like his first real intro of, hey, all your fighting stances are barehanded fighting stances, and he's got to like learn how to use that. But it's a lot of his martial art prowess that saves his bacon time and time again. And I wish, see, like other lit RPGs that I enjoy, the organic progression for he would have gotten a grappling ability or a grappling skill, where for this one, it's very structured to where you get a skill at this level, because you chose this path, this is what it will be. But once you get further, you can modify it, which is kind of cool.
More of
But, you know,
a
like,
wild
well,
star toolbar where you got like only a handful of abilities versus the typical like
too many buttons.
too many buttons. Let me set up my macro button rotations for how to do this. Um, it does focus on the physical element though. And taking two steps back, you talked about the storyline and how it really helped with the immersion. I feel that the AI is a big part of that because his um, his master called him out on his fighting styles being more for grappling and fist to fist. So it kind of helps us see that like, oh, his actual in-world abilities are coming through in the game as far as like his fighting goes, but also that the AI was intelligent enough and interactive enough in the storyline to
I
see
guess I
those
took that a
things and
different
connect
way.
it with him. You took it a different way?
Yeah, I felt like it was a little too convenient, but nobody else in the beginning of the main storyline had a weapon. So I felt like finding a
Okay.
dojo was your first opportunity to get a weapon. But at
Hmm.
the same time, like, it could have been a very tactful elephant to, you know, connect it.
Yeah.
It could have been both. It could have been, I guess I
One,
breezed
yeah.
over it and I was like, nobody has a weapon.
No, no. That, yeah. Yeah. Not so much on that point, just like the AI element and the immersion element and the physical fighting element because like one of his first quests he has to like earn the master's approval or something like that with the sword.
Yeah, yeah, to
So
actually develop and get the skill.
yeah, he actually has to go through the proper motions and consciously execute. And it talked
Well,
about his focus strike feeling like an energy running through like his body as if like he's channeling it through. uh,
yeah, and then the same thing for the parry, and then the same thing for when he gets picked up by the guilds, and it's
mhm.
kind of like that rock, paper, scissors, lizard, Spock moment where they're deciding whether or not they're utilizing energy with their moves, and you know, if you use energy when they're not using energy, you're going to be down energy, and
Mhm.
if you don't use energy and they are, then your parry's not going to work, and you're going to lose your weapon, be disarmed.
Yeah, I enjoyed that element of the combat a lot.
Yeah, I that was very unique, and yet again, like, we got to see a glimpse of armor potential because of the assassin that tricks him into the defending the territory, where she
Named
brings out her
Blaze,
gear
right?
and everybody's inspecting it, as well as when the guilds are trying to recruit him. They're
Hmm.
not guilds, they're,
Clans,
yeah, when the clans are trying to
the
recruit
equivalent
him.
of a guild. We switched back and forth between typical gamer terms and yeah, the storyline.
And so we get to see like the reduction armor trying to make it fair, and yeah, like we still haven't felt the thing that irks me, because I love this element and it will get there, I'm sure, but he didn't care about his gear. Like, that's my favorite part, is the ooh shiny, like getting a new piece of gear and
He's an
equipping it
MMA
and
guy. Like
looking
he
at
wears
your
shorts and
stats.
goes, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
If it
and
was hard enough to get him to use a bamboo stick, like he just wants to grapple with everybody.
yeah. And
So
that's where, like, this book stays true to its core of, this is a mixed martial arts guy, and that's what it feels like. You know,
so
he realizes certain elements. He's got the bob and weave, the dip, dive, duck, dodge. If you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball mentality.
name that reference. Anyway, um, I wonder and curious your thoughts on it. Eventually, I want to get, well, first, scaling. How do you feel this book did with scaling? Because that's something
For
we.
character progression and scaling, I felt a little underwhelmed, but in progression for like quest line, story arc, it
Hmm.
did really well. Like he lost everything. He gets into this world, he finds a new mentor, and he bonds with this mentor, goes through several different iterations and hardships until we kind of like get to the conclusion of that arc, which is gonna kind of set the foundation for the rest of him. As well as like at the beginning, I was just thinking, typical MMO stuff, but it really seems to be hinting that it's going to be a lot of war games to where, oh, what's that movie? The Last Samurai? That's kind of what
Okay.
made me think of or feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you for the most part on scaling there. Um,
But for first book, I guess all in all, it was pretty good.
Next question for you is, do you feel like that was one of your struggles? I believe it was one of my struggles with this book was I am a gamer. I do understand like the culture and other elements of the game and like mechanics that I wanted more of it, where this is just so super newbie friendly that you don't get a lot more of those, or I didn't feel as much those aspects in the book. Um,
Yeah, that's where like I felt they could have dug deeper and done more, but it fits with following along with our main character. The fact that he isn't a gamer, he never would have thought of picking up a game. He was almost insulted that it was even thought of.
hmm.
But as he's going through and it like says a lot of terms and it's essentially is like I have so many questions, but let's ask one because if I asked all the questions of knowledge that I don't know, we'd be here forever.
Hmm.
So it's convenient in that it's not overwhelming. Where a lot of the lit RPGs that I enjoy, such as Life Reset, like you'll literally get a solid minute, or at least a minute at 2 times speed of stats dump, where we're getting every single stat this guy ever has, his whole armor listing, his whole spell listing, and for
Hmm.
me, I'm like, oh yeah, we're about to do some epic stuff. Like we had to remind you of all of it so that you can, understand.
Yeah, and it helps going along in the storyline by getting that you understand that much more when it comes down to the combat or when it names the ability and they've read it off and explained like what it does for the
And that's where
visualization. Oh, go
for
ahead.
this, like it it does it differently because it talks about his whole training is about how to best utilize the energy, and that's where the whole like rock paper scissors lizard Spock thing comes in. He ends up utilizing some of his abilities without being in the proper stance or without the proper follow through, or as he's falling over from diving over a chair or whatever. So it really goes into, I guess, more MMA type stuff where like, yeah, I can Chuck Norris you in the face, but if I was, didn't have the proper stance and follow through, I'm
What are you
landing on
talking
my
about?
head instead
The answer
of
is roundhouse kick. Big
what's that?
bad guy, roundhouse kick.
Yeah. Yeah. So like
The
I
eyes of a
think
ranger.
as
The
much as I wish it dealt with more of those elements, it kind of hints at it. And where I think this one will excel in the future is modifying the abilities. And the big one that we got to see was, oh, the red versus blue guy after that whole incident when they end up getting, spending 5 goals to get into the, oh,
she was
Shadow
like
No Shadow.
Yeah, fox spirit, right?
No, it's the spirit. It's because the fox is a different thing. The fox gets
Okay.
the color pattern.
Ake?
I can't remember. I'm
Okay.
sorry, guys, but anyway, she's got the life steal ability, which so you steal life from somebody, but then she's got like two mods and an augment on it to where she can life steal, but she can also life swap. So what initially was a long range, way to disengage, have someone else pull the aggro, regenerate your health so that you can get back into the fight. Now you just stay at range and you're a damage dealer, but you can also life swap into becoming a healer and the whole like backstab mod to be able to attack people in your party. And
They
I
also
feel like,
hinted some potential there with like the beta testers and how they've changed their abilities and modified them, as
yeah,
well
change the
as,
drops.
yeah, the one guy that was like whispering to him at one point.
Yeah,
There's
that's
a lot
exciting.
of potential that it's enough to make me interested in continuing the series.
Plus,
Like,
like a lot of the big hush hush or I'm not going to tell you or you'd make a good samurai or Roni was all about completing the main storyline and not spoiling it. So that was done very tactfully and beautifully
hmm
done.
hmm
But it was also hinted that like the beta players, the original OGs are, utilizing abilities and stuff and yeah. Plus, so throughout the whole like sextuplets? No, what's seven? Anyway, the Luke,
Clones,
I'm your father, brother, sister, mother.
toaster.
Yeah, the whole like he joins the group and then there's an extra person in the group, but he doesn't know who it is, and then they give him the born of the ox spirit or whatever, and then they kick him out, and then he goes back to his other territory, and then there's a clone or the twin or however you say it, and just like, oh, sorry, what I'm getting to is the people afterwards who are like, oh, whose clone are you? You know, blah 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 blah, and they're like grilling him. And he's like, nope, not me, not that, and they let slip that they're pushing new content that will unlock stuff for everybody. I would be okay now that we've like solidified and finished the main, master quest or whatever,
I was about
with
to
a
say he
time
just picked
hop
his class.
into him being the big bad or the yeah,
That's
being
one of the
BA on the
struggles.
front line pushing.
Yeah,
What's that?
I was about to say that's one of the challenges I've noticed with some of the lit RPGs, that it's hard to do both because they're typically shorter. Like scaling wise, like yes, I want those epic god tier battles. But he just picked his base class, right? To get all the way there, you gotta, yeah, end game, first 48 hours of release. One of the better analogies, if we had to make the comparison to anime, is, do you remember dot hack sign?
Yeah.
I
I was
feel in
like
a
one of the
way
originals.
this has more, I feel this is closer to dot hack sign than it is SEO, where you don't get as much of the overall like video game aspect of it, the culture aspect of it. You just get the main character type perspective going through a new gaming experience, new content.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that'd be a good comparison because SAO, they're gamers, they're the cream of the crop that pre-ordered and
mhm.
scheduled time off work and is a diehard
We're in
trying to
beta.
min-max everything,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
dot hack is some random guy who just realizes that he's actually in the game.
hmm
And yeah, he's yeah.
So, all in all, the story really grew on me. Um, Definitely interested in reading the next couple. It might be one that my vote is to kind of shelf the series for the upcoming Geek Outs. Um,
Or we didn't
because
have the next couple in the series yet, did we?
I think we might.
Oh, well, I know there's only 3 out, and I enjoyed it, but yeah.
There's a lot of other stuff I kind of want to geek out on.
Well,
Um,
it has its place. It's very new friendly. It's very Japanese culture friendly. Um,
but
but
for the
it
lit
didn't
RPG
really.
itch you want to scratch, being the gamer ultra geek that you are.
Yeah, it didn't really scratch that itch, and I might be a little biased because like I just finished Glory to the Brave, Ascend Online's book 4,
Yeah.
where that book up until 3 was primarily PvE, organic world development goodness, and
Mm-hmm.
then 4 was primary PvP, protecting what we have. And that's why like I didn't feel satisfied with the combat because like it didn't quite solidify for me because this guy is a mixed martial artist. This guy is great at not dying. This
Mm-hmm.
guy is like, everybody wants him to join their clan. Like people
Mm-hmm.
see the potential, but he didn't like get any special abilities. He didn't, I don't know, which it doesn't fit the whole theme. But yeah, a lot of potential, but
Yes.
yeah.
Agreed on all fronts. Agreed on all fronts. Um, yeah. We haven't even really decided too much about what we want to do for next week, right? We'll have to make an announcement, push that on social media. I was brainstorming some fun things that we could do, and some of our friends are picking up some other books we've already covered. Would you be interested in doing like a continuation geek out on some titles, or would you want to keep to just strictly new stuff?
I mean, the more the merrier. That's fine. We can go back, and I think it would be a
Because we
unique
could talk about
perspective because
other
we
things
kind
that are
of,
awesome.
well, we kind of have like we agree on a lot of things
True.
because you were the guy who introduced me to dot hack sign back in the day. I was
So
borrowing
good.
your WoW account while you were at work,
No,
for the
we
original,
weren't
like, we
violating
were,
terms of service. What are you talking about?
and,
Uh, anyway.
and then, like, we, had the LAN party for the Wildstar launch.
Oh,
That was
yes.
a
Ah, such a
complete
bad
mess.
launch.
Like, we kind of,
Oh, memories
have a
though.
lot of the same experience. So, getting the viewpoint from someone else, and
We
then kind
always
of the same thing.
enjoy
Like
hearing from you guys.
we currently don't have a MMO that we're binging because that's where lit RPGs just fill that void in my life. Because any 90s baby that grew up with WoW knows that WoW is not a video game. WoW is a way of life.
Yes.
It
Pork
was the very first video game to ever kill somebody. Like, that's how real this is. I think a
settle.
guy spent like 7 days straight and he died from not sleeping. Yeah.
There were plenty of lives that got derailed thanks to that game. It's, yeah, plenty of people skipping class. Yeah, we won't go down that rabbit hole. But settle it for everyone. End of 2020 for the Alliance or for the Horde? Peter?
Oh. Yeah, we always rolled Horde. We were
Always
not
roll
those
Horde.
pretty boys.
Uh, for the Horde, Thank you, everybody, for geeking out with us this year. You'll be hearing more from us about what we plan to do with 2021. Have a safe new year. Wash your hands. Practice socially distancing on the live streams with us. Yeah. Anything else, Pete?
Hope to geek out with you soon. All right. Is that our
Yep.
tagline?
That's our 2020 tagline. Tutorial
I
completed.